Hi everyone, and welcome back to our Nova Thrive Consulting channel. My name is Lelo Lewis and I am an industrial psychologist in supervised practice. The Health Professions Council of South Africa recognizes 8 branches of psychology. I will only be discussing 5, and then of course, because I am en route to becoming an industrial psychologist, I will then be expanding a bit more on industrial psychology. Really, the aim of this video is just to equip you with more information. I think especially for those who are starting out with their psychology in undergrad, and maybe even those of you who are in high school who are considering going the psychology route. It's quite important that you do your research and understand the different branches so that you can make the best decision for you. So let's get right into it. When people hear the word psychology, we often think of, a room, leather couch, box of tissues in the middle, and someone on the other side who's listening to you pour your heart out, and they're there to then give you advice, right? That's what we usually think of when we think of psychologists, but that is not entirely true. So I'm going to start with the psychologist that in my opinion is the most commonly known, and those are our clinical psychologists. To make sure that I am accurate, I am going to be looking at my phone from time to time just to read the notes and make sure that I am not missing out on anything. Right. So clinical psychologists, they are trained to assess, diagnose, and treat mental health conditions. And these are the conditions that are more on the severe end. So such as depression, anxiety, trauma-related disorders, even personality disorders. And that's why you will find that clinical psychologists do operate in more clinical settings, such as your psychiatric hospitals, behavioral centers, correctional facilities. The clinical psychologists, they also come up with long-term interventions. So they are dealing with a person who has this mental health condition that is preventing them from functioning on a day-to-day, and then therefore they come up with a long-term evidence-based therapeutic treatment plan to then help this particular individual. Right. So that's, I think, as simple as I can explain it. Naturally, if you're more interested in it, there's a lot of YouTubers that break down exactly what clinical psychology is, or what it looks like, what a day in the life of a clinical psychologist is. This is just giving you a foundational understanding. Then the next one is counseling psychologists, and I must admit, I myself was quite confused between the distinction of a clinical psychologist and a counseling psychologist. I've now come to understand, that there are some differences, though there might be also quite a few, overlapping between what they do. So with a counseling psychologist, they focus on helping individuals navigate life challenges and also improve their psychological well-being. So their work often involves supporting individuals through experiences, this can be grief, life transitions, and emotional adjustment. So they're coming in to play that supportive role, whereas unlike clinical psychologists, they work, with often more complex mental disorders. So with our counseling psychologists, it's slightly different in that they don't typically work with the more complex cases like your personality disorders, for instance. Where do we find our counseling psychologists? Well, private practice, universities, schools, wellness centers, and even organizational environments. One I want us to look at is neuropsychology, and this, in my opinion, is quite niche, right? So from my understanding, the only university that offers neuropsychology is UCT, and feel free to correct me in the comments. Now, what their focus is on is specifically how the brain affects behavior and cognitive functioning. So they will typically work with individuals who may have experienced like a traumatic brain injury, or they have neurological conditions or cognitive sort of difficulties. So neuropsychologists will then perform specialized assessments just to understand how the brain is functioning. Work is again often based in hospitals and more of your clinical / medical settings. Then now we have the one where there's quite a big misconception, and I admit I was one of those people as well. It's educational psychology. So when we think of educational psychologists, I think the only place we think they work in is in school settings, and that is incorrect. Their role is much broader and more specialized than that. And really the core or the key thing that our educational psychologists do is to focus on learning and development, right? So that tells us that if they're focusing on learning and development, of course you will find them in educational settings, but you also do find them, working for government. You find them also working in more educational policy driven environments. So it's not just necessarily in school where you would find an educational psychologist. So their work really is to work with individuals, mostly children, who may be experiencing learning difficulties or developmental challenges, or have some sort of barrier that affects their ability to function effectively within an educational or learning environment. So what they do is, using different techniques, they assess cognitive and learning functioning, and then they also provide support and recommendations to help individuals learn and develop more effectively. So that is why you will find sometimes if there is a learner who's having some educational difficulties, they would then have an assessment with an educational psychologist, who would then say, this learner would basically learn better in this kind of school. And they provide those recommendations. Okay, so again, settings that we find them in, like I said, mostly educational settings, which include, working for the Department of the Department of Education, in schools, but also in private practice. So while educational psychologists focus on, learning and development within an educational environment, industrial and organizational psychologists then focus on human behavior within a work context. So human behavior in the workplace. Again, just my opinion, but industrial and organizational psychology is one of the broader fields of psychology, and I think also perhaps the one where it's most misunderstood, because people are less familiar with it. And by people, I mean myself. Yep, myself included. When I started studying, I just thought, I'm in corporate already, I can do industrial psychology. I'll just help people solve their problems at work, and I'll do counseling just in a work context, and that was completely incorrect. That's not what industrial organizational psychologists do at all. And from this point on, I'm just going to call them IOPs, because it's quite a mouthful. So IOPs specifically focus on how individuals function at work, and how organizational environments influence behavior, well-being, and performance of said employees. Now, the role of an IOP is not only to support well-being, but also to help individuals to develop, to function effectively. And I think an important distinction is to reach their full potential within their work environments. Now that you have an understanding of the different fields within psychology, I think it now becomes important for you to take time to really research and find out what aligns with who you are, your interests, your strengths, and the kind of work you want to do. In what kind of setting do you want to find yourself in? What kind of clients do you want to work with? And all of those things will then help you to understand which part of psychology you are supposed to be majoring in and then potentially registering in the future. So if you are a student, a graduate, or even someone who's navigating a transition and you want to find out what direction to take, this is exactly the kind of work we do at Nova Thrive Consulting. So please don't be shy. Do get in contact with us. Our details are on screen. But for me, I think I'm going to end it here. I hope that you have enjoyed this video and it has given you some insights into the different fields of psychology. As I said, there are 8. I have only discussed 5. So please do make sure that you also do research on the remaining fields. Yeah, but from me, I think I will stop here. Thank you so much for watching. And please, if you're interested in psychology content, anything related to personal development, career development, or how to even help your organization function effectively, please do continue watching, liking, and sharing our videos. Yeah, I think I will close it here and bye.